Good morning, everyone. I am saying good morning, but I'm also getting used to the mic. It is great to be here, and I will say to follow a panel like the ones before could be a little daunting. I am so glad I'm just kind of tucked in between that panel and David Steiner. When I saw him walk through the door, I said, I am so glad I get to go first. And you will find out, I think, very quickly, and it's a credit to TNTP, Impact Florida, the folks who have put this together, that there really is a nice connection between sessions. I was also glad that you all were going to get a break, because I will tell you, I looked and saw that band of time and thought, oh my God, are they going to sit? I wouldn't sit through me through all that time. So I'm glad that you got a little bit of a break. I am here today really just to share with you some of the work that we have been doing in Baltimore City. I share the work as a colleague. I share the work as someone who represents a system of folks, very much like particularly the teacher and principal, my good colleague, Dr. Blackburn, who I said to him, my God, you were looking great after leaving the superintendency. So I tried not to linger and talk to him too long, because I was like, dog, should I be leaving to look that good? But this is about the actual work that we're doing, and the frame that we have taken in Baltimore, I want you to know, does not mean that we have in any way solved all of the questions that we are raising for ourselves. So we are in this work with you, alongside you. It was wonderful to see Joy and our principal here as well. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. I don't know where she is. Is she still here? Rebecca, okay. And Rebecca, there's Rebecca. And because I love when folks in the field actually verify the work. So for those of you whose faces are familiar, who I've seen before, you get to sit tight through part of this. Part of this is not new. Part of it is because, again, this is a journey for us. So within Baltimore City, we really began a lot of this newest iteration of equity work probably about what will in August be 3 years ago. We're about little over 2.5 years in. And really, when we ground the work, what was encouraging but not surprising was to hear that still the push to center our educational work within a lens that, one, is focused on children, but is also situated not in isolation, as if education in and of itself is just this one little bowl, and all the work we do is in that one little bowl. It is an extension of what communities have experienced, what young people and their families experience every day. And so it's interesting, when I did my first State of Schools in 2016, I had gone to 3 funerals that summer of young people who had been shot and killed. Since that time, I have probably been to an additional 17 or 18. Fortunately, only 17 or 18, because as a staff we rotate just for our own mental health. But what it does when, and many of you know this, when you go and you have to hold the hand of the mother of an 8-year-old who was shot and then later died, and it puts what we do in a much larger context. It's not about how do I feel about this particular thing on one day or the other. It's not disconnected. It is part of an ecosystem that I would argue and did and have been within our work in Baltimore City, framing around a larger drive for equity. And equity is now, you know how we are in education. We like our little things. We did RTI, right? Then we throw around, integrated curriculum. And now we say equity, and often I have now gotten to the point where I ask people, so what do you mean when you say it? Because now it's become kind of a buzzword thing to say. And so the challenge I give myself is trying to be as specific as possible about what our equity work looks like and what it's framed and how it should be for me and everyone else in city schools, right, representative in the work we do at all areas of the organization. So one of the things that we did, and at first it seemed a little, folks looked at me a little bit like, why are we doing this? Is we looked a little bit into what is the history within Baltimore City that has brought us to the place where we are. And I'll show you some kind of quick data snapshots of where we are. But that it is actually grounded in a lot of decisions that took place in government, in business, in housing, right? And I don't know how many of you here know, but Baltimore City is famous for a lot of amazing and wonderful things. The one thing, though, or one of the things that we are a leader in, that we taught the rest of the country how to do, that we frankly are infamous for, is redlining. We taught the rest of the country, not Mississippi, and I can say Mississippi because I have family in Mississippi, not Florida, not California. Baltimore taught the rest of the country how to systematically use legislation around housing policy that then drove financial investments in cities, right? We taught the rest of the country about covenants that would exclude some folks and allow others to live there, and did it very nicely by just scribing it in little things called community covenants. There's a lot of history around that, but we went back to 1930 and we looked, and what you're looking at now is a 1937, what we would now call redlining map. The nice way to say it is a Baltimore residential security map. This is from 1937. So we took a look at that, and what we began seeing, right, and what we had to force ourselves to look at is that, and again, everybody wants to go back to slavery and everything else, and they say, well, why can't folks get over slavery? Why can't they get over this and that? I said, we don't even need to leave the 20th century. If you don't want to go all the way back there, let's just go back to 1937. And even if we start there, what we begin to see is that those policies set in place a generation of decisions that were made that are impacting the neighborhoods where our young people are coming from, what their families have experienced. And one of the things that we know is that generations of decisions made over and over again have now had a compacted impact. And so our young people just didn't arrive this way because somebody didn't give them the right cereal in the morning. The mama didn't just come to school probably with a heightened sense of anxiety, because in the city of Baltimore, if you live in certain sections of the city, there is no what I would call robust public transportation. So yeah, I get ticked off in 10 minutes more at a broken red light, let alone, right, having to travel all the way across the city, come to my child's parent meeting, only to have somebody say stuff that, frankly, my husband with a couple of degrees is like, sometimes y'all educators, you deliberately make things really complex, right? But to do all of that in that context is what has landed us the context that we had. Now, we go through this, and one of the things that we did was we looked at, okay, if that was 1937, all the way back there, what does it look like now? And so we came up with, as Baltimore City Schools, our own Community Conditions Index. And so we had about 50 indicators that we could have taken from what's called the BINIA, which is a collection of critical neighborhood data within Baltimore City. Many cities and states have it. And we just pulled out 6. And we began to chart where are the places, both historically and presently, where the lowest amount of investment has been made, all the way up to the highest level of investment. This is what our Community Conditions Index looks like now. Does anybody notice anything about this map and this map? A lot of it's the same. You've had some movement, right? You've had some movement, but a lot of that is the same. There are researchers in Baltimore that call it the black butterfly, right? But what is interesting is that there is very little within that map that has shifted. So this is present-day Baltimore. We took present-day figures on levels of investment, everything from which areas of the city are you more likely to find people with library cards? Where are you most likely to find parks and open air spaces? Because in mid-Atlantic cities, that's a big deal. Not so much in Florida, by the way. Thank you so much for ordering the weather you did. I came off the plane and I went, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't bring my wool coat. So, right, but everything is here. And so it has become this Baltimore, two Baltimores depending on zip codes. And we walk around in it. A lot of that was kind of internationally combustible. That explosion kind of happened during Freddie Gray. But what a lot of people will tell you is that stuff was there. That was just a peak that the media decided at that point. But as you see, this has been generational. Now, it's very easy as educators when we look at this to say, wow, this is really horrible. Look at all of the housing decisions. Isn't this horrible? Like there's no playgrounds. What are kids doing? And then we started looking at, I wonder what our decisions look like if we were to map them similarly to this same residential map. And people went, oh, well, I don't know why we have to look at us. That's not really us. That's a housing issue. So the first stage of our inquiry was really around kind of opportunity. And we started mapping everything from capital dollars to where we have teachers with the longest tenure, which schools, which neighborhoods are they located in. This is one that we did, and I always give the head of our gifted and advanced learning department major kudos because they went first. They said, map our data first. We're willing. You can make it public. And that's what we did. So if you look at this map, I'm giving you kind of where we are now. If you look at where we were in 16, 17, which it's hard to see now, but those pink dots, what we held ourselves to is we were going to deliberately expand gifted and advanced learning sites in those red and orange sections of the city. It didn't mean we kept them. So like my neighborhood is that dark green right up there where the Hopkins professors live. My kids can go to 2 parks. Their librarian has known them since toddler time, right? And now my oldest just turned 13, right? We decided now in those neighborhoods, never had an issue with the gifted and advanced learning. When we got into the red sections, that's where we knew we had to put our investment, and that was just baseline. So we did that with everything, like I said, from construction dollars all the way down to another map I could show you where advanced mathematics opportunities were for young people and where the pipeline for those advanced mathematics, because we have a way of doing it too. Again, not always intentionally thinking we have a positive frame, right? And we'll say, well, but we don't have as many kids that qualify. We did it in reverse. And we said, if the goal is that the numbers of these opportunities increase, what do we have to do to disrupt, right, the results that we now see? Assuming that it's compounded effect. So we started there, and again, we all like that because it was like, okay, this is a little bit harder, but this is about resource and opportunity. If you look at the current context now, what's really interesting, and actually this isn't now, this is 2017 park data, and so when we say that stuff happened a long time ago, the impact is still now. So this is 2017. Our 2018 data had a slight uptick. I mean, nothing I would hold a parade for, but it's going in the right direction. But if you take a look at this, one of the most interesting pieces of data, so this was shown, we showed this my team came to me about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years now. And I will give you, just take a look at it. There was one piece of data in here that I lost it on. So I'll give you a chance to take a look. Okay. So the piece of data that I lost it on is take a look at the African American ELA proficiency for non-economically disadvantaged. So African American ELA blue bar. Everybody got that? We looked at that. Now go down, same ELA to white students, and look at the orange bar, which is economically disadvantaged. And what do you notice? Go ahead and say it. They're pretty much the same. So one of the things that I had to say to folks is, what are we doing? We want it to just be about one thing. This is saying it's something else, because what it's saying in part, and again, cursory data, no, we didn't do an in-depth analysis on it, but it was enough to start the conversation of what are we doing at schools if our non-economically disadvantaged African American and Hispanic students are performing at about the level of our economically disadvantaged white students. And people looked around the room and said, are the doors closed? Right? But what it did was it surfaced a series of questions that required us to go even further. The other piece, and this is just kind of overall, right? And this is I just put this slide in here so you all know, again, I'm not up here perpetrating as if we have solved everything. I will say, like, my requirement for my team is, it's about growth. It's about accelerated growth. We're not going to get there overnight because it took over just about under 100 years. I'm not even counting pre-1937 to get here. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we doing in where we sit now? But what that started, as we started asking that question, is it took us levels. So the first level was that level I showed you around just programmatic access. The next level was what's happening at the school in the classroom level. And so the beginning of that, which David Steiner will take you far deeper into in terms of the kinds of questions we asked. We're not the whole subject of his keynote, but what he talks about will speak to that, is we actually had to ask ourselves the questions, kind of what is the level of the content, the curriculum. So when Joy, like that's why I felt like I was in church and I was amening. When Joy's like, look, I'm teaching. Somebody else is responsible for the curriculum that's actually put in front of me. And she is right. That is not the teacher's job. Teachers are going to Pinterest because we are giving them generalized answers. We are saying, make things more rigorous. This is not grade level. And I loved it when she was like, where's Joy? Is she still here? Girl, I loved it. When Joy said, come in and show me. Don't dip in and out and say it's not grade level, it's not rigorous enough. Because she's right and she was really nice about it, that is not her job. And so I pushed out to our curriculum and instruction team and I said, what are we doing around our materials? So we made the shift. We're seeing some really good early movement because we went to more grade level standards-based materials in ELA, our math uptick. Again, it's not to the point, talk to me a couple years. Folks are like, don't you want to show the growth data? And I was like, yeah, no, not right now. It's not enough. Y'all keep working, right? But as we were having these discussions, right, so a lot of us thought, not really, it would have been easy to say, great, we have curriculum, now we have standards-aligned curriculum materials. And it is giving us lift, and people give us accolades for that. But I knew in my heart, as an educator, as a former chief academic officer, as a former head of professional development, I knew that even though I was smiling and saying, yeah, great, we have it, I knew what Joy knew. And that is, there's another piece to this, and that is what happens in classrooms. So as we were going in classrooms, and I'm going to give you 2 examples today, if we're going to talk about educational redlining, it has to be at multiple levels within our organizations, or we will give ourselves the advantage of thinking we have checked the box and moved on, and we haven't. And if we can't do it with credibility, we will have teachers like Joy who rightly say, don't talk to me about your rigor until you give me what I need to do it, and until you can explain to me with a certain amount of a proximity what you're seeing that is sending you the signal. So one of the things that I did last month in our principal meeting is I modeled for some of our principals what that looks like. Because I wanted them to know from this seat, we are looking at what is happening at the point at which teachers, students, and curriculum come together in what could be a powerful alchemy. But if we stay up here and only use this generalized term of equity, we will pass this on like another buzzword, and we'll have another generation of kids and communities to add to a centuries, as my good friend said, a centuries-old pattern of continued disinvestment. So here's an example. So we adopted Eureka Math. I know a lot of you all have too, right? And it has really helped in beginning to move our student achievement. But I want to give you an example of kind of real time what I call and what I said to principals and teacher teams, because they all come together once a month. In my last meeting with them, I said, what's great is we have this new standards-aligned, rigorous curriculum. And it's great. Not perfect, because no curriculum's perfect. But it's great, and it's so much better than where we were. And we get so excited because I'm in there and I'm waiting to see it. I'm like, this is a great task. And what begins to happen with that task is we come right up to the point where we ask kids to think. And we're like, oh my God, this is going to be so good. The kids have to really think. The kids have to produce, and but then we take a sharp left. And that's what we're seeing. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing teachers who were like, we did not have mass waves of protest as was going to be predicted. Why? Because by and large, our teachers knew and said this is the right thing to do. We didn't have mass outpouring of, oh no, we should now, our kindergarten teachers are still coming along. But 1 through 8, we haven't had that. Our parents love it. So our PTO person who asked the question earlier, like PTA, sorry, I know there's a difference, right? We've had parents who are saying to us for the first time our kids are learning in-depth content. Like they love it. But I'm telling you, in the implementation, it's like, bam. And so my question has become, what was the teacher thinking when he or she made that hard right through the left? Why did you do that? And not in a punitive, accusatory manner, but how do we begin to unpack why that hard left away from the rigor is occurring? Because like we like to, in our district, probably not in any of yours, we do a lot of, there's too much over-scaffolding. But who the heck knows what over-scaffolding is, right, Joy? I mean, somebody comes up to you and says there's too much over-scaffolding. What are you going to do with that? Nothing, right? Like, what does that mean? So here's an example. So in our Eureka curriculum, right, this is actually not like necessarily, as a matter of fact, my math people were like, yeah, why don't you just take something baseline? Because, people get upset if they're not comfortable in math and they see math. So this is fairly baseline in terms of the standard. I mean, it's still solid, but it's not kind of one of the more advanced standards, right? So it's about solving linear equations with rational number coefficients, right? And including equations that require expanding expressions, okay? So classroom 1, 2 different classrooms. Classroom 1, fairly straightforward, right? So everybody take a quick 20 seconds, fairly straightforward, right? This is not, 8th grade, not kind of in-depth. And by the way, you should know at this point in the year, when the 2 classes were doing this was after a couple of months. So this was considered review. This is not introduction, because normally when I see scaffolding, first thing people want to say is, oh, but I'm sure it was just introduction. This was not introduction. This was further along. This was after students should have mastered part of it. So in classroom 1, the teacher starts with, what's the goal when solving the equation? Student response, right? To have the x equal to some constant. In this problem, what is one possible first step? Student 1, one possible way, subtract 1/5 x from both sides using the subtraction property of equality. Again, this is not like the most in-depth math problem we could have put up here, but I'm using this to prove a point. And so, right, one student actually does the math using that approach. Teacher, can another student give another possible first step? Student, subtract x from both sides using subtraction property of equality. Again, remember, this is review. There you see the results, right? Teacher again, can another student give another possible first step, right? And corresponding student work. Now, what's interesting in this class, again, keep in mind, this is review. This is not intro, this is review. Teacher walks through. What happens is 3 possible entry points to the problem, right? And then students get to identify, which is where the student results came from, right? Which problem they individually or in their pairs want to try. So what is your entry point? Teacher brings them back. They have a discussion about the variety of the entry points, but did they get to the original goal of solving the equation? Seemingly straightforward, right? Let's go to classroom 2. These are real classrooms in Baltimore City. Now, I'm sure your classrooms are far more advanced. I'm sure you would never see any of this in any of your classrooms, but bear with me, because in Baltimore, we may not be as far along as other people. Classroom 2, same question. Teacher action. Oh, sorry. Now that you have written the correct equation, so the teacher starts by reading and asking students to copy the equation onto their paper, and that's what the student does. Next question. If you want to get rid of a fractional coefficient, what do you do? Response, right? Gets repeated, whole class hears it. Multiply everything by the denominator. Great. What is the denominator? Again, keep in mind, this is review. Students have worked on this before. They say what the denominator is, whole class. You guys can all say it because the answer's up there already. What's the denominator? 5. And you modeled exactly what that class did. Remember to multiply each term by 5. Again, not an intro. They've been doing this a while. Multiply everything by the denominator. So what you see here is what you would find. Look, now, use the properties of equalities to isolate the variable. In the first example, in the first classroom, all the teacher did was give them the first step and then set them to the task. In this, the teacher has literally walked through a review, what that's supposed to be a review, right? That has asked students pretty much not to do anything, right? So there's no productive struggle. Now, we could get into a long discussion, but what I find interesting, and this gets back to the educational redlining, who do we allow to experience productive struggle, and who do we not? And I will tell you, that question does vary based on the composition of the class, and based on the school. The greater variation, though, interestingly, is usually based on differences in class composition. So students in that second piece, all they're doing is recalling, right? There's no opportunity to have different entry points. And I'm going to say something, and I just want us to be aware, because I do want to believe good intent, but I also believe a lot of us carry within us vestiges of practices that we don't know. And so I'm going to say something, it's a small crowd, you're in Florida, and I can hit the plane and go back to Maryland. So I probably wouldn't say it's in Maryland, that's not true. What I don't believe that second teacher knew, because I'm assuming goodwill, is that one of the major underpinning premises of segregation of schools in the South, and you can go back. I mean, I could pull up the artifacts, right? They just did it nicer in the North and the West. But one of the major foundational principles of why certain groups of children should not be in certain classes that were blatantly and forthrightly propositioned was that certain brains, namely the Negro brain, was not capable of complex thought. That all that brain, my brain, could handle was simple computation, simple plug and play. And if you don't believe me, I can pull out some historical documents where it is written, where it was said in board meetings, and where it was used as the major argument for why there needed to be separation in populations of children. So part of why I call this practice educational redlining is because when we do this, intentionally or not, and I agree, I don't think most people walking in and saying, how can I just redline today? I don't think people are coming in with that. But if we are not conscious, and if we don't put this level of decision making in the context of compounded access to attaining proficiency and gaining skill, we are disconnecting ourselves from the results that we saw earlier. And that's why I say, why are we making the hard left? Because I think if I went to the teacher, she wouldn't say it's because I have such and such kids in my classroom. I have a classroom of newly arrived immigrant children. I don't think the teacher would say that. But I will tell you this, when I do, and Joy, you'll be happy to know I do this, when I do have conversations with teachers, when I walk into their classroom and I ask them the why, not the you did this, you were redlining, but so tell me why you did it, which usually has nothing to do with this, and then link it to now I want you to think what would happen if you did that over the entire year, compounded over multiple years. What would the readiness be of those young people to then meet the high school standard that is listed there? Another example. Wit and Wisdom, really happy with Wit and Wisdom, moving folks. Like I told you, parents love the content. It's hard. Our teachers will tell you it's hard. David Steiner was in some of our classrooms, right? But they're moving it, and kids are definitely getting better access to content-level learning. Again, no curriculum's perfect, but what we can't control for, except through expert coaching and giving teachers space to reflect, is again, some of the decision-making that teachers are made, right? So this is standard. You'll see that I just listed the standards, right? And again, I just took regular lessons. I didn't fab anything. These are just this is what folks were doing on the day. So they're supposed to work. The learning goal was to work in pairs to group details with the correct major event. Young people had just been reading realistic historical fiction, the character Olivia, I think it was a pioneer story, Journey of the Pioneer, right? And this was the simple lesson. Again, and this is why I like to just take the everyday, because any teacher knows not every day is this wonderful integrated project that you just do 5 days a week. This is every day with the curriculum given. The goal was, and this is right in the curriculum, what second graders were asked to do was to kind of cut, you can see it there, but cut the main events, which are on the left, your left, cut the main events out. Again, they had already read this text. So one of the things I started asking is when people say, well, we're staying on the text too long. What I am finding is that part of why people are experiencing we are staying on the text too long, is because they're doing the same thing. And then all they were supposed to do was cut the key details and then match the key details to the main event. Again, quick review, can you do it? And I will tell you, and again, this one, we all give major, because it's first-year teacher. I won't even get into the support we give first-year teachers. So what the teacher did was created a whole other organizer. Right? Oh, no. To give the students those 2 pages? No. Teacher created an additional organizer where she took 3 details from the details bank, the 3 major events, and this is what she did. She read the text aloud to the students. This was a text, grade level text, that they had previously read. Why are you reading it aloud? They followed along with the hard copies in front of them. What key details did Olivia record in her diary? Now remember, this was all supposed to be independent group review. They recall 1 or 2 details from the text in large group. Model the recording of 1 key detail given to the first major event. They write it in. Copy what the teacher wrote on her organizer. You see? Now, I know this only happens in Baltimore. I know you all have no teachers who do this, right? Guide students to identify the second key detail. So now this was supposed to be an entirely independent activity. We are now on the second detail that the teacher is walking them through. Copy what the teacher wrote on the organizer. Sends students now, and so that you know, this was supposed to be 25 minutes, if I remember correctly, about 25 minutes of independent work. 20 minutes has now been eaten up of teacher direct guide. And then at the end, she sends students off to work in pairs, and how many key details are left for them to find? 1. So the taking of the rigorous and the breaking it down, right? This is the example. This is when we say, this is why we have to give the examples, because then we show this, the teacher's like, oh my God, I did that? But do you see that systematic breakdown? And this, we know from other data points, is more likely to happen. I mean, come on now, let's break this down. This kind of reduction is more likely to happen in classrooms that have a majority of children from low SES backgrounds and a majority of children of color. And so to separate our actions from the redlining maps is dishonest. It's dishonest, and it is an insufficient response. So where we are now is how are we making sure that the rigorous curriculum that we put in place is actually part of a full cycle of teachers understanding what the implications of those compounded hard lefts. And by the way, has the teacher done more or less work? So she had to go home. I think it was a she. I don't want to just say it was a she. Let's say he. He had to go home, come up with the organizer, do all that extra work, basically has done all the work when, right? Actually, if they had set the entire task the way it was designed to be, would have had far less to do. So, this educational redlining at a classroom level, and the discussions we're having with teachers is why, what is getting in the way of giving children productive struggle? What are you worried about? Why did you make that turn? because that redlining is just as important as the housing redlining. And it is just as important as where we put gifted and advanced learning programs. And so if we don't have the courage to ask those questions in that context, I would argue, I would submit to you that we are not going to get to the depth of what is required to address the opportunity gaps that the TNTP study surfaced. Quickly, one of the things that some of our Baltimore, like when I talk to some community members, the ones that like remind me of some of my older relatives at barbecues, I don't know if you all have relatives like this. I have relatives who, because you're in education, they want to tell you all that we are doing wrong and everything that went off the cliff. So I got a couple uncles who were like, girl, you know y'all's problem? You just need to bring back the good voc tech stuff, right? And that's what they tell me. They're just like, before we weren't trying to get everybody. I mean, now these are Southern older black men I'm talking about. So, they have internalized some of this too. Now, again, they're all retired with pensions, so they're fine. They're fine. Girl, that's the problem. You just expect everybody to take physics. It just doesn't take all that. You can get a job doing something else. And I love citing this data. So this was a report that actually I didn't have to put together this time because one of our great partners, the Fund for Educational Excellence, just came out with an analysis of our CTE programs, our career technical education programs within the city. And they did us a favor, which they always do. We were in the middle of doing an audit of these programs anyway, and their study has just so helped us move it to the next level. So whenever I meet people like that, either at my family barbecues or in community meetings, this is some of the data that I cite for them. And I say, manufacturing. Do you know, actually, if you look across manufacturing, so to be a machinist, the welders, all the things people want to say, it just doesn't take all that anymore. You still have to have 9th grade level reading and math by the end of the first phase of training. You can't get a job adding and subtracting, not a family-sustaining wage job. Somebody will give you a job, but you won't be able to sustain a family on that. Same thing with maritime, 8th grade reading and math. Now, if you look at, some of these required entry level, just kind of fix them in your head. Now I'm going to show you, this is where Baltimore City 11th graders fell in 2016, 2017. And I know it's far away, so I will save you some of it. If you look at reading and you look at math, the red color is a K level placement all the way up to the dark forest green, which is 11th grade. So when people ask me, why do we have to spend all this time on curriculum and teaching and learning and all this? Can't people just go out and get jobs the good old-fashioned way? I say, really? Because this data is scary. And again, by the way, this is new standards data. So this is aligned to new 7th grade level standards. It's not as if we've got a bunch of young people that we've educated who can just, if it doesn't work out for us, we'll just go and get other jobs. So what I'm going to move to finally is one story, because I always feel compelled when I am in rooms like this to make sure that the voices of young people are heard. And one of our graduates, Xavier Plater, went to Douglas High School, which has been in the news a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And actually, Douglas High School was the high school where if you remember, during some of the Freddie Gray press stuff, kids were flowing out into the Mondawmin Mall area. I was in DC when that happened, but Xavier is a graduate of that high school. And one of the things that's interesting about Xavier is I came to know Xavier because he was at Douglas High School and was part of our student media team and did amazing work, as part of our student, loves the camera, understands production, whole 10 yards. Well, the sad part was, and so some of our team just our central communications team said, so, Xavier, what are you thinking about doing after school? And this gets to the opportunity myth. Oh, yeah, I think I want to go to college. Great, where are you thinking about going? I don't really know, talked about some stuff. Long story short, I'll accelerate since my time is short. Found out Xavier was about, at the time, 3 to 4 grade levels below in reading and math. But he had aspired to go to college and felt like he was doing everything everybody had asked him to do. So our team, fortunately, worked with the principal, got him some tutoring, right? And eventually, and again, I'm accelerating the story, ended up getting a full scholarship to go to MICA, which is the Maryland Institute College of Art, and it is one of the foremost art institutions, post-secondary institutions in the country, and some there would say the world. Okay, and this kid is from West Baltimore, but he is a young person who thought that he was on track, and had he not had that experiential interruption, we would have missed his genius. And so what I'm going to do now is show you a clip of a piece that he stars in and produced that was picked up. And this was before he actually got into MICA. I think he used this to get into MICA, but this was before. He did this as a high school student. And for me, it is powerful because it is what happens when our young people are able to tell their stories with the tools of learning that we are charged with giving them. The brilliance is there. It just gets shortchanged when we compound the lack of access to quality learning over a long period of time. So thank you for giving me this time to share with you just some of the work that we are doing. I will tell you, I had lunch with Xavier, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, who's at MICA. And one of the things he said to me, well, first I will tell you, he showed me his freshman, I think first semester film class video, and I was like, let me bring that. He's like, miss, he said, Dr. S, there's just too much cussing in there. Where did you say you were going to show that video? And I said, that's right, let's use your old one. We'll do that. And actually, I did tell him, I said, I think they could take it, but I didn't. But I had lunch with him, and I asked him how it was going. And he said, it was hard. It was hard. And I watched him kind of struggle, because he is a hopeful kid. He really, now he's a young man. But he is such a hopeful young man. And I watched him struggle with the dissonance of holding his pride and his talent, good pride. Pride in himself, pride in his talent. At the same time that he would interject with, I just wish I had had this earlier. I just wish I had known this earlier. And part of what I think he is struggling with, which is why members of our team try to have lunch with him regularly and check to see how he's doing, is he's saying, but other people are coming. See, because now he's in a different world. He's not in West Baltimore. He is in a different world where he is seeing what other people got. Not just because of their money, but their preparation, their knowledge base, their exposure. And so one of the things I had to take time to do during the lunch, I had to stop him at one point and say, wait a minute, baby. So let's hold up just a little bit. I need you to know what you don't know is not your fault. That is on us. This is a kid who got to school, who did what we asked him to do. He got to school on time. He kept his nose clean. He dodged violence that could have taken him down at any point. He did what we asked him to do. And he still felt unprepared. And I said, that is not you, that is me, and that is every adult along the way who did not give you what you needed to be able to walk into those classrooms in a foremost institution of higher learning and know that you belonged there. So let me tell you now, your talent puts you there. Your drive has put you there, and we will do better. But that is the long-term consequence. And he says all the time, he said, I just need to go back because, I'm at least here. But there are so many other people that I grew up with, Dr. S, who aren't. And I said, exactly. And I said, I can't stop all the violence on the streets of Baltimore. I can't erase or change single-handedly housing patterns in Baltimore City, but I'll tell you one thing. We can change the pieces we have control over. And that is what I hold myself accountable to whenever I put my head on the pillow. I have to do from my seat. We have to lead, and we have a saying in Baltimore City, and some people look at me like I'm nuts. You have to lead from your seat. Leadership is not a title. It is not 3 letters next to your name. It is leading from your seat. It is the teacher who I sat with for 90 minutes in a coffee shop while she explained to me some of the challenges in the planning she was having so that I had a first account view of what people on the ground are experiencing. That is our charge. That is the courage piece. The courage to own what we own. So anyway, next time, what I'll do is I'll send Xavier's piece. I'll let him know y'all were okay with some of the profanity. He is doing well, but this is the work. I know it is the work we share, and thank you all for the time. Much appreciated.